June 28, 1914, late morning in Sarajevo, the motorcade slowed at a checkpoint along the Apel Quay, and confusion broke the rhythm. Hands waved, orders crossed, and in that hesitation, the future bent. The hinge was simple and devastating. An unintended stop at the corner by the Latin Bridge put the Archduke's open car within a few paces of a waiting gunman. Everything that follows in this story compresses into minutes. The day had already gone wrong. Earlier on the route to the town hall, a bomb was thrown at the Archduke's car, bounced off, and exploded under a following vehicle, which meant everyone knew the drive was dangerous. At the town hall, the Archduke insisted on visiting the wounded in the hospital because he felt responsible for the injured men. The governor agreed, which led to a new plan. Avoid the city centre and continue straight along the river road Apel Quay to the hospital. That change mattered because drivers had been briefed on a different path hours earlier. They expected to turn right across the Latin Bridge and climb into the inner streets. There were no radios in the cars, and instructions had to move by messenger or by shouting over engines and cheering crowds. As the procession left the town hall, the lead driver kept his eyes on the printed itinerary he knew. He slowed near the Latin Bridge to make the right turn he believed was correct. In the second car, the Archduke rode with his wife in an open-top touring car, a choice made to be visible and welcoming, which also left them exposed. Security was thin by modern standards. Police lined the route, but the city's plan relied on timing and speed, not total control of every corner. Because the first attack had already scattered the day's schedule, timing was broken. On the sidewalk near Schiller's Delicatessen, a small shop on the corner by the bridge, a young conspirator named Gavrilo Princip stood among ordinary passers-by. He had failed to act earlier and now waited, unsure the Archduke would come this way at all. The motorcade reached the corner, and the mistake unfolded. The lead car turned right exactly as the original plan required. A cry went up from officials who knew about the change. No right turn, straight to the hospital. The governor in the Archduke's car called out that they were going the wrong way. The driver braked to a stop. He began to reverse in the narrow street, gears grinding, a common challenge for heavy cars of the time, which meant the car slowed almost to a standstill. In that instant of stillness, the open car lay nearly level with Schiller's corner. Princip stepped forward from the crowd, raised a pistol at close range and fired 2 shots. The exact minute and shouted words differ in accounts, but all agree on the stop and the short distance. Witnesses froze. The car lurched as the driver threw it into gear. By the Latin Bridge along the river, the caravan accelerated toward the governor's residence because it was the nearest place with doctors and telephones. The city's sound shifted from cheers to alarm. It was just before late morning turned to noon, a span of minutes from error to shots. The choice to continue the visit had come from a mix of duty, pride, and a wish to project calm authority. There were alternatives. They could have cancelled the drive after the first attack and returned directly to the station under guard. But that carried its own risk: panic, charges of fear, and lost control of the city's mood. They could have kept the original turn across the bridge and maintained speed without stopping. But that route carried them toward more crowded streets and additional ambush points. Each option had costs that were not clear in the moment. What made the new plan fragile was communication, or rather, the lack of it. One driver heard the plan at the town hall, another did not. No one confirmed by radio because none existed, and the escorts focused on clearing pedestrians rather than relaying final instructions. The governor's signal came too late. A simple hand motion had to compete with engine noise, people shouting, and the adrenaline of a morning already marked by an explosion. Logistics weighed on every second. Cars were large, heavy, and slow to reverse, which meant a wrong turn could not be fixed quickly. The streets by the bridge were tight. The river hemmed one side, stone buildings hemmed the other. Crowds pressed in to see the royal couple, curious rather than hostile, narrowing the space further. Morale also mattered. Officials wanted to prove the city was safe on a day of celebration, which pushed them toward continuing the program rather than shutting it down. And the weather, bright and clear, encouraged open cars and open faces. Because the motorcade came to a halt, chance and planning met. The conspirators had fanned out along the route expecting only a brief glimpse. The first attacker had already missed, others had lost their nerve, and now one man who stayed put found the Archduke delivered to him by mistake. From the bridge corner to the governor's residence took only a few minutes at speed. Telegrams began to move within the hour. Sarajevo's authorities informed Vienna. Vienna informed the emperor and the ministries. The news travelled by wire to chancelleries in Berlin, St. Petersburg, Paris, and London. At each stop, the message looked simple. The heir to the throne and his wife had been shot in Sarajevo. Behind the message lay a day of small errors. By early afternoon, the city was under tight control, and investigators rounded up suspects, many of them paid only a few coins and drawn by a cause that seemed local and urgent. The broader picture, however, was no longer local. In Vienna, leaders weighed how to respond to a crime that felt like an attack on the state. In Belgrade, ministers weighed what a demand from Austria-Hungary might look like. To explain the next step, one term will help. An ultimatum is a final political demand backed by the threat of consequences if it is refused. Within weeks, what began at a bridge corner in Sarajevo fed into a chain of ultimatums. On July 23rd, Austria-Hungary sent its ultimatum to Serbia, a text with 10 demands, some designed to be impossible to accept. Serbia answered with concessions and objections. Vienna judged the response insufficient. Mobilization orders spread. But those weeks are the long echo. The tight window we've followed ends with the unintended stop and the immediate shock it created. Because the motorcade paused where it should have kept moving, a direct line ran from a driver's turn to diplomatic cables, from a car's gearbox to a continent's nerves. The trigger was the wrong turn at the Latin Bridge and the forced stop at Schiller S. Delicatessen Corner. The underlying causes were thin security, a late route change that was not carried to every driver, and the pressure to show confidence after an earlier attack. Had the driver continued straight along the river without stopping, the hospital visit might have passed without incident, although other dangers remained along the way. Had the couple withdrawn after the first bomb, the city might have stayed tense but quiet. The empire's leaders would still have sought a way to assert control, perhaps with smaller steps. We can only mark what the actors knew then. They had no way to see how a minute's pause would widen into a month of threats and mobilizations. They did know they were being watched by supporters and critics alike, which meant every choice sent a signal at home and abroad. From the perspective of the men in those cars, the main constraint was clarity. Who gives the order, and when, and by what means? How do you enforce speed on a public road filled with bystanders? They lacked tools we take for granted: secure radio, sealed routes, layered cordons. The plan depended on timing and goodwill. When timing broke, the plan fractured. The shots themselves took perhaps 2 seconds. The meaning settled much more slowly. Telegrams multiplied, ministers drafted language, and ambassadors carried measured phrases that hid urgent tones. The first ultimatums of the summer took shape in this atmosphere, where honor, alliance promises, and domestic politics all pressed on the same page. Sarajevo's corner, quiet again by afternoon, had already done its work. In the short term, the empire grieved and tightened control, the city fell into mourning, and court ceremonies turned somber. In the long term, this moment accelerated the July crisis, a rush of diplomatic demands and mobilizations that soon broke the peace of Europe. A stop that lasted a heartbeat moved an entire system closer to war. One distilled takeaway remains. When complex systems are under strain, a small failure in communication at the wrong place and time can redirect the course of nations. If this turning point gripped you, like and subscribe for more from Vanguard Law.